What's up, YouTube? And welcome to my video of the games I picked up during the month of October 2018. This month I definitely did some travel. I visited the Portland Retro Gaming Expo in Portland, Oregon for the third straight year, and also did a little bit of few extra days on that trip and went up to Seattle and some other places in Washington I hadn't been to. Just kind of checking it out, seeing what other games I could find while I was out in the Pacific Northwest. Other than that, just some general work travel here in the Midwest and some local finds as too. What you're going to see in this video is I didn't really get a whole lot of games this month, but I got a lot of game-related stuff. So some things to complete some of my games that I already had, and some other just oddball things that I happened to find either at the Expo or just in other locations around. So we're going to start off with some Sega system games that I got first. This is Miracle Warrior Seal of the Dark Lord for the Sega Master System. This is not a particularly rare game or anything like that for the Master System. I believe it's just a first-person RPG. But I did decide that I wanted to get this at the Expo because it had a very complete copy in more ways than one. So the first interesting thing about this is one of the late stickered releases of Master System games that has this Sega for the 90s sticker that they put on the back of the box, on the back of the manual, and also on the cartridge. And I always like to get those little variants. I think there's about 30 or so games that got that treatment. So this had obviously the manual, cartridge, and box, but it had a couple other things that had the package as well. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to show this on the camera, but this is the very detailed and classy map that came with the game originally. It has the logo of the game here on the top. Got a nice artwork and everything like that too. So even though while the game itself may not be that hot, I thought the map was very classy, and it's also even on like a nice paper too. But that's not all. There was one other thing in the package that really put me over the edge of wanting to buy this particular copy, and that is that there was some graph paper with hand-drawn maps by one of the former owners of the game. So you could see the amount of work that went into this. I definitely remember this era of gaming when you would make maps like this for games of this style, you know, which was a lot of work. But definitely appreciate the attention to detail and just a nice little historical piece of that game's history that came with it. So anyway, that was the only thing I got for the Master System. We'll move on to a couple games I got for the Sega Genesis. First one of these is World Series Baseball 98. You probably are thinking, big deal, it's a sports game, but to be honest, this game is a little bit difficult to find complete. It was obviously a very late release for the Genesis, and supposed to be a pretty good game. I've played a few of the games in the series on the Saturn, so curious how they are on the Genesis, and just decided to grab it because it was a couple bucks. One other game I got for the Genesis this month is one that I've been really struggling to find a nice, clean, complete copy, and luckily I got it at the Portland Con as well, and that is for Trampoline Terror. This game is kind of an interesting action puzzler style game that has an overhead view, and I've always really enjoyed playing it. And this was a nice upgrade to a complete copy because I just had the cartridge before. So one thing I will say about this, one of the reasons this game is so difficult to find complete in nice shape, is this is one of the DreamWorks published games in the US that just came with like a very plain white label that is extremely condition sensitive. So if you want a nice copy of this, they are pretty tough to find, along with their 2 or 3 other games that they put out as well. I got a Dreamcast game this month. Very unusual because I've had a complete Dreamcast set for about 3 years now and have pretty much winded down my efforts in looking for Dreamcast stuff other than a couple imports that are still on my list I would like to find. However, this is one of the new releases from that developer, publisher, Josh Prod, that is putting out so many different releases on the system. Most of them are really just emulated games that are put onto a Dreamcast disc. There's not that much technology or excitement going on or innovation, but this one definitely caught my attention. This is Bang Bang Busters, and this was a unreleased Neo Geo game by Visco that was developed around the year 2000, I believe, and for some reason never made its MVS or AES release as planned. So this game obviously is not pushing the Dreamcast in any way, shape, or form. They could have easily put several games on this disc, but they decided to release it as a standalone along with a couple other games that Visco had published, or not published, but developed back in the day that Josh Prod has the exclusive on now. So I had a lot of excitement about this. It is a single-screen platformer game like Bubble Bobble, which is one of my favorite games of all time, and I really enjoy that genre. My excitement was dampened a little bit whenever I got it and played it for a couple hours, and really just was annoyed by a lot of the sound skipping issues that it has when transitioning music from stage to stage, or at the end of a world in the game and things like that. So to me, if you're going to be releasing games on the Dreamcast and they're not at all pushing the system, put a little bit more effort into the quality of the emulation so that we're not having these issues. Obviously, there's tons of YouTube videos raving about how great Josh Prot is, but to be honest, most of those people are people that are getting these games for free, and I can give you a more genuine review of this game because I did pay real money for it, and unfortunately it is a little bit disappointing. So, hoping for better stuff in the future if this publisher is going to continue putting out obscure releases like this. Let's move on to a PS1 game. I haven't bought many PS1 games lately because I've pretty much completed everything that I would like to get for that system, outside of a few exceptions. But this is one of the oddballs that for some reason I just had never gotten, and this is Rescuecopter. Doesn't really look that exciting on the cover, but this was part of a Japanese series of helicopter games by a developer called Aqua System. And you can also get one of their games on the US Wii, but there were several of these that were Japanese exclusive that came out for a few different systems. They actually play pretty good. They're a little bit entertaining, so I decided to grab it. This was a late budget release for the PS1, so I don't think there's a ton of these out there. However, it doesn't really go for much money. So if you're interested in such a thing, easy one to find and pick up. I just never had it before now. Next, I'm going to get into probably the most expensive and exciting game I got this month. This was not bought at the con. This was something I got off eBay. This is a game I've been wanting for the PC Engine for a really, really long time. And I decided to finally bite the bullet because I had some eBay bucks in my account. So this is Nexzr for the PC Engine Super CD. This is a fantastic shooter that was developed by Kaneko Interstate, who also made the Star Soldier series games for the PC Engine. This game plays very similar to those, although it has a lot more use of the Super CD functions of the system. It has some nice cutscenes in it. It has just some really good graphical effects and things like that that you don't necessarily see in a lot of the PC Engine shooters. That all said, this game is rails hard and nails hard, excuse me, and I have really been struggling to get very far in it. But one thing I do like is it does save your scoring, and it does save the highest stage that you've made it up to so you can continue from there, which is a nice feature for a game this early that really didn't happen until much later before you saw things like that with save features. Very cool game. There is also a Summer Carnival 93 version of this game that has a very plain white cover. It does add the time attack modes that this game does not have, but it does also lack the cutscenes that this version does. So it's kind of a trade-off as far as which one to get. That one is cheaper and a little bit easier to find, but this one I like the cover art so much better, and just decided to go with the original style package overall. So very happy to get this game off my want list. I've been wanting this game for years, ever since I started importing games, and can highly recommend it based on the parts I've played so far. I got one other Super CD game this month. This was a local find, and this is for Shapeshifter. This was, I guess, intended to be part of the legendary Axe series. It was maybe developed by a different developer who was intending to use that license, but for some reason that didn't happen. So graphically, this game looks very good. It's kind of your Gladiator, medieval style hack and slash. But it tries to add more of a action RPG element, so it has these very plotting town scenes with horrible voice acting that you can't skip, and really slows the pace of the game down. Some of the controls are a little bit questionable as well. I played quite a bit of it, and I just kind of got frustrated with it and turned it off. But graphically, it looks good. It definitely could feel like the next part of the Legendary Axe series, but is nowhere near as good as the first two games. And other than that kind of cool artwork on the cover, I can't really recommend this one. So next we're going to move into some portable games. One game I got for the Game Boy that I've been kind of putting off because I can never find this really cheap is Beavis and Butthead, and decided to finally pull the trigger on it. I think it was one of the later releases for the original Game Boy, so it is somewhat difficult to find, but it's not one of the top rarities or anything in the system. But one of the top rarities of the system is this next game. This was one I found at the Portland Con and was extremely excited to get. This is Mr. Do, and what I can tell you about this one is this is the proper US release of this game. If you look on eBay or just in game stores, even in the US, you are probably 95% chance likely to find a UKV version or Euro version of this game. For some reason, the US version of this game is very uncommon, but a lot of the European ones have leaked into the US market, and that is what you will typically find. So if you look, I don't know how well you can see this, but on the actual coating of the label there, you will see -USA. That's how you can tell the difference. The artwork's the same on all the other versions as well. Obviously no gameplay differences. But for a Game Boy set, which I'm still kind of loosely chasing, I really wanted the proper US version of this, and was happy to finally find it. And it's a really cool game. arcade classic as well, so definitely a fan. The other game I got for Nintendo Portable this month was Nights and the Nightmare for the DS. This is a game that I've owned with the PSP for several years, but I was just kind of curious how the DS version compares. I probably would expect the PSP version to be a little bit better, but this exists on the Game Boy or on the DS as well. So we'll check it out. I haven't had time to take a look at it yet. So that is all the games I got this month, but I do have lots more to show you. So let me show you some of the other things I got this month, and really we'll start off with games that I upgraded to either getting the manuals or boxes I needed to help me make complete copies of some of my older stuff. So first one of these is a manual for Return of the Ninja by Natsume for the Game Boy Color. This game is very, very difficult to find complete. I actually got in a bidding war on one of these for a complete copy of this on eBay over the last month, and it went like skyrocketing high. It almost doubled the price of the last copy that sold about a year ago. So I still would really like to find a box for this. However, as a consolation prize, I found somebody else selling the manual a few days later and got that off my list, at least as a starting point. So very cool, obscure game for the Game Boy Color that probably will continue to go up in price because ninja action games tend to hold their value, and it is a difficult to find Natsume release. So anyway, nice to get a manual for it as a starting point. Another very difficult to find manual I got, this was out in Portland, was for Rolands Curse 2 for the Game Boy. This is a pretty cool RPG from Sammy, who isn't really known as a RPG developer. And I just so happen to have a mint condition box for this game, so this is all I needed to complete it. And I was very happy to find this manual because it's not something you see sold loose very often to go with my box, and now I have a complete copy of the game. Another game I was able to complete is Burning Force by Namco for the Sega Genesis. I just needed this manual, and had been looking for this for a long time too, but it got it very cheap, and I stick that off the list. A random NES manual I found out there was for Thunderbirds. This is kind of an obscure game by Activision. Doesn't go for a whole lot, but you definitely don't see it very often, so nice to get that. Manual is in extremely nice condition too. One thing I got at the con that was kind of unique, I'd kind of forgotten that this existed, was the strategy guide for the original Adventures of Lolo on the NES. This was a mail-away item that you could order from HAL, and they would send you this kind of thin strategy guide that is all black and white. However, it does have a lot of very cool hand-drawn maps for all the stages in the game. So very neat. Probably something that existed in Japan, which was much more popular at that time. But then they, decided to release a US version of it just as a mail-away special. I think there is a strategy guide for Lolo 3 and maybe even Lolo 2 as well. So now that I have this one, I'm thinking like, oh, maybe I want the set of these. But just a nice little curiosity for the NES set that I didn't even remember existed. So, and I do like the Lolo series. Pretty neat series of games that unfortunately has not gotten a sequel anytime recently. I got a box for Nemesis on the Game Boy, which was, I believe, Gradius 2, or Gradius maybe, I can't remember, I think it's Gradius 2, essentially just renamed for the US market. Nice condition box, and I already had a manual for it, so this is a complete copy now as well. I got a couple NES boxes. First one of these was for Target Renegade. This is a Taito release. I'm trying to get a full set of the Taito releases for the NES like I've done for the Genesis, all complete. This is one that is kind of loosely a Taito game. It is based on the Technos game Renegade that they published in the US. But this, I believe, was developed by the European company Ocean, and it's like a quasi-sequel to Renegade that has a similar visual style, but plays nothing like the original one, and really kind of sucks. But do kind of like the artwork on the cover, at least. It's nice just to get it. It's not one of the more expensive Taito releases, but it was one that I still needed, so happy to get that off my list. One of the coolest boxes I found out in Portland was for the Crying Conquest, or the Crying Conquest, however you say that. Very neat, obscure Mega Man clone by Vic Tokai, and the artwork on the box is equally obscure and weird, and probably did not sell the game much more, so just nice to get that off my list as well. I already had a manual for this, so this is complete too. Another just completely oddball thing I found locally was a very early cleaning kit for video game systems. And they were selling it used for 99 cents, but it essentially hadn't been used much, so I decided to grab it. And that is the Doc's Video Game and System Cleaning Kit that works for not only your common systems like NES and Genesis, but even some of the Atari systems. It has little cards that you can stick into the system to clean the system slots. and it has a unique way of cleaning the NES toaster system, and that it has like a snap-on piece that you add to the end of a game cartridge, and then pump that in and out of the system to clean the system itself, versus a standalone cleaning cartridge like most of the other cleaning system kits for the NES work. So I just thought this was kind of cool. It came in this like video store bright pink case, and was super cheap. And I just thought it was kind of a unique piece of video game history. I'll show you the back so you can see like kind of all the stuff that's included in there. But there are a lot of just little plastic doohickeys and pieces to clean all your various early gen systems included in there. Another random local thing I found that was kind of neat. It was a brand new PS1 DualShock in blue. I don't know why that this was never opened, but it was sold as a used copy or as a used controller at my local store, and I'm probably just going to keep it in this packaging. It just seems like a neat thing to add to my PlayStation 1 collection, and I like these colors that some of these early DualShocks came in that I didn't actually even have this color, so just nice little oddball thing that I found. Another thing I got at the con was one game magazine. I was actually hoping to find more game magazines out there, but I didn't. And honestly, it's not a bad thing, because they're a pain to drag home. But this was a PS1 era issue of Game Informer that had Final Fantasy VII on the cover. Pretty neat issue. I've already read it through. These early Game Informers are like paper thin, or just really thin issues, so it's easy to go through them. But this one was a good read, and had some other interesting stuff of the time, Saturn and PS1, that it was covering in the issue. So just a nice issue to add to my game magazine collection I did not have. I have one final thing to show you, and this is probably going to be hard to get on the camera. This was a very last-minute Portland Retro Gaming Expo purchase. I was like making one last round on the floor before they closed it up, and I happened to see this that I had not seen before with all the crowds that were there the day before, and that is the original marquee for, I'll kind of scroll it over, X-Men vs. Street Fighter for the arcade. This is a game I've loved for years. This is one of my all-time favorite arcade games, and it also is what got me into import gaming in the first place when the Japanese Sega Saturn version of this came out back in the late 90s. So, neat little history with this game for me personally. I thought the artwork was really cool. I'm obviously a fan of both franchises, and definitely someone I'm going to put in my game room that I thought was cool. What I will also add about this is shortly after I bought it, I attended a panel by Jimmy Hoppa, who runs Import Gaming for the Win on YouTube, one of my favorite channels, and I was very excited. He flew out from Japan to make the con and do a panel, and he caught me in the hallway and said, you know, hey, you're bubbling, right? And I said, yeah. We talked about this for a little bit, and he just thought it was kind of neat that I got this too. So I was very excited about this at the time, and just neat to get another arcade marquee just for display. What I can say though is arcade marquees are not easy to travel with. I thought this would fit in my suitcase. It did not, and I had to essentially just carry it onto the plane with me very carefully to make sure I didn't shatter the plexiglass. So anyway, that about does it for the month. Thank you guys for watching. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. And I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.